Hello everyone, and welcome to today's webinar, Why You Should Become a Certified Environmental Practitioner for your sake and the profession. Before we get started, I would like to go over a few items so you know how to participate in today's event. You will have the opportunity to submit text questions to today's presenters by typing your questions into the questions pane of the control panel. You may send your questions at any time during the presentation. We will collect these and address them during the Q&A session at the end of today's presentation. We have a copy of the presentation available for you to download in the Handouts section of the control panel, so feel free to download and save the presentation. So this should normally be down the bottom, one of the bottom options on the control panel. Click the plus where it says Handouts and you can download the PDF file of the slides. We also plan on recording the session as a video and uploading it most likely to our YouTube page, which will be accessible from the members section of EIANZ.org. For those of you who were at the last webinar, there was a little issue with that video which I'm still trying to edit and fix up before I can upload it for you all. Unfortunately, due to a conflicting appointment, Alan will be unable to attend today's webinar session. I would now like to introduce Lachlan Wilkinson of Environmental Consultants KBS&G out of the Adelaide office. He's a Fellow of the Environment Institute and a CEMVP Impact Assessment Specialist. All right, I will hand over to you now, Lachlan. And I've handed it over to you now.
Okay, thanks, Jamie. See if I can get this technology to work. Okay, hopefully that's showing up.
You might just want to make it a full screen. It's on the slideshow.
Right, sorry. Okay, is that showing up at your end okay, Jamie?
Yeah, that's fine. That's gone full screen. That's good.
Okay.
All right, I'll let you take it away.
Okay, look, thanks everybody for coming along. As Jamie mentioned, Alan is an apology today. Unfortunately, something came up that meant he was unavailable. He may be able to join us later in the presentation. He may just be able to make it into the CMVP office and be able to be available if there's any curly questions that I can't answer. But as Jamie mentioned, today's presentation is about why you should become a Certified Environmental Practitioner, or CENVP, and I'll also touch on the process to go through, as well as mentioning the specialist certifications. So, right. Hopefully everybody's got the second slide now. So the origin of the CMVP, it was something that was developed by the Environment Institute of Australia and New Zealand. The EIANZ saw a need for a certification program and was well placed to develop it themselves. When you look at the similar certification programs around the world, there is a bit of a mixture of programs that have been developed by professional associations, as well as programs that have been developed by government. But back at that point in time, so around 2003, governments weren't moving on that themselves, so EIANZ moved and developed this initiative over a couple of years. From the EIANZ perspective, they saw it as being very closely related to the purpose of the EIANZ, which I've mentioned there on the slide. One of the things that they did make sure when they set it up was that it was not going to be a closed shop. So you do not have to be a member of EIANZ to be certified. Although when we get later on to the application fees, there are significant discounts for EIANZ members. The other thing that affected the way it was set up is that it is at arm's length from EIANZ. It has its own board that runs the program. It is set up under a bylaw from EIANZ, but the CNVP board is an independent organisation in the sense of having the decision-making authority themselves. And part of that was to have the CNVP programs recognised through the Australian standards for certification. Why wasn't it implemented? There were a number of reasons which sort of led to EIANZ wanting to push ahead with the scheme. The environment profession is one of the younger professions when compared to others such as the engineers have had certification programs for many years, accountants and various other professions. But it is developing, very much developing as a very recognisable profession. I guess we saw, EIANZ itself was formed in 1987, and that was a recognition that the profession was sufficiently defined and cohesive to actually warrant having an association. Part of the EIANZ's sort of mandate is to promote good practice, and the CNVP scheme is seen as being part of that. We're also finding that governments are increasingly wanting to see greater accountability. One of the and that push still continues to this day, and if anything, it's increasing. We're seeing that particularly at the moment around the contaminated land space, and so government's looking at bringing requirements for people submitting information to EPAs to be certified, and it's part of wanting to ensure the sort of credibility of information that is submitted to governments. At the moment, one of the problems is at the moment anybody can call themselves an environmental officer, environmental manager. Anybody can put together an environmental impact statement, for example, and submit it. From the profession's point of view, as well as from government and others, it's always been important that the certification program could help to sort of recognise the competence of the people who were certified. The other thing that was particularly an issue back in the early 2000s was the increasing cost in professional indemnity, and the CNVP sort of certification was seen as one way to help to reduce the cost of premiums. From a practitioner's point of view, I guess there's a number of things which we would see as being the benefits. The first thing is that it's having recognition as a CNVP does help to build credibility, irrespective of what part of the profession you're in, whether you're in industry, consulting, government, or even academia. From my perspective, when I became a CNVP, I was working in government, and I guess there's a bit of a sort of view amongst government that that CNVP is probably more targeted towards consultants, and I guess in part for that reason it took me a few years to apply. But my rationale was that as more and more consultants became certified and were submitting information to government, and I was working in the environmental assessment area, then it was quite reasonable for those consultants to be saying that, well, we're certified, but who are the people who are actually assessing our documentation, and what's their level of competence, and the demonstration of that. So I saw it as being important for myself to get certifications to sort of show that provide that sort of confidence to the industry itself, that hopefully the assessors do know what they're on about. One of the other, I've listed a number of benefits on this slide, but the commitment to ongoing continuing professional development is something which I actually see as a benefit. It is something which some people may see as being a bit of a obligation, and something that in having to meet that. But one of the things that I think we all find is that we get busy in our working lives, and unless there is that push there, we tend to, it's very easy to neglect your own professional development. So having that requirement to have 100 points of professional development, and I'll come to that, what that means later on, I think it's actually a good thing to move that up your priority list and ensure that you do maintain your professional development. The recognition, I think, is in terms of job selection. Look, it's something that certainly won't hurt your chances. I think if I was recruiting, I guess if you ask the question, would I employ somebody just because they were a CMVP? Well, I think the answer is no. You would obviously want to make your own checks about somebody's capability, background, experience, and the things which are important to you in your selection. But it certainly does help to increase your confidence that if somebody checks out on all those other things, that knowing that they are CMVP and then so have been reviewed by a panel of their peers and determined to be a competent and ethical practitioner, certainly helps them to increase the confidence that that person is a suitable employee. Which actually gets on to the next stage about benefits for employees. The other thing for employees is that it could also help their reputation. So if you're an employer and you are seen as having a number of CMVPs on staff, then that may help you to promote yourself as to promote your company or your organisation as being an organisation that's committed to high professional standards. For the profession, one of the important things about the CMVP and the reasons for setting up in the first place was to increase the credibility of the profession to the public, so that they have confidence, hopefully have confidence in what members of the profession are saying, the work they're producing. And the CMVP program is important, which has been an important part of that, because it does show that it does help to sort of show that that people who have been through that process, that there's a certain rigour around that, and that it does demonstrate the level of competence that hopefully will build that sort of trust within the public as well as within other sectors. Some of the other, I guess, the other benefits, we are, as I mentioned, we are seeing an increasing interest from government in ensuring that suitably qualified and experienced people are being used to perform certain tasks without having this sort of certification program in place. There is a risk that you could have a whole range of different requirements across Australia and New Zealand. Now, we already have seen that to some extent with the contaminated land area, in that at the moment there are some differing requirements between the different EPAs as to what certification programs that they are prepared to accept. And I believe that there is some work on to try and harmonise that a bit more. But having a certification program, well developed and established certification program that government can rely on is important for getting that sort of harmonisation. So where are we today with the scheme? As mentioned, it was established in 2004, set up under a bylaw of the EIANZ. That bylaw was recently reviewed, but the board that provides the overview of the program, and there is an appeal process which is important, and the CNVP does have a budget and is in a strong financial position, and we have a whole network of conveners and panels in place, as well as as registrars. So currently there's 670 CNVPs. That's as of yesterday, and that includes a number of specialist certifications. So particularly, I mentioned that the government's push to have contaminated land professionals certified, and that has resulted in quite a bit of interest in the contaminated land specialist certification. With 43 specialists at this point. There's 2 applications intakes per year, and the next intake closes on the 3rd of March. Just looking at the growth in the number of CNVPs, and you'll see quite a steady growth since its inception. So that's been on a continued upward trend, and we expect that to go on. Now there is a CNVP website, and that has the application form. There's guidance material and a range of other information as well. So if you are interested in applying for CNVP, certainly do go to that website and check it out. Which brings me to a poll we have. So Jamie's got a poll set up, and I think the question is are you intending to apply to be a CNVP? And I think you've got it's a yes and a no choice, or a choice of you already are a CNVP. So we'll now move on to the requirements for certification. The first one is a relevant environment-related degree. So by environment-related, that means either a degree that environmental science, environmental studies, environmental management, or something with an environment in its name, where it's pretty clear it's an environment degree. But it can also include degrees that have a substantial environmental component, so that might have a major in an environmental field. Also, in some exceptional circumstances, for somebody who doesn't have an environmental related degree, but if they have more than 10 years of experience in environmental management, then that could be enough to be considered to meet the requirements in lieu of having a suitable degree. But if you're in that situation, I suggest that have that discussion with the CNVP office to see whether the experience you have would be suitable to be recognised in lieu of that requirement. Environmental practice there's a definition up on the CNVP website. It's investigation, management, assessment, regulation, policy or training related to practice. Practice being with some practical application or practice-related outcome. It's in one or more aspects of the environment where the experience claimed is at a professional level, and the practitioner is responsible for outcomes or is professionally supervised. But if you missed that, have a look. It's up on the website. And again, if any queries around that, feel free to contact the CNVP office. One of the important parts of the CNVP is it is about practitioners being both competent and ethical. So the ethics part is a very big part of the process, as well as and that will come up in the interview process. So you asked us to sign a statement of ethical conduct. And that's also addressed has to be addressed by your referees. So you're asked to nominate 3 respected environmental professionals who obviously would be willing to attest on your behalf and who have known you for, I think, more than 2 years. As with any referees, obviously use people who are seen as being some independent or not having a conflict of interest. Not family members, for example, which seems an obvious one, but apparently that has come up in the past. And professionals who are seen as having credibility and so recognition within the industry. Another important part of it is the ongoing commitment to professional development that I mentioned early. So one of the tests is to sort of demonstrate that you do have that commitment, and then once you do become a CNVP, then you are required to have 100 points of professional development over a 2-year period. And then once you submit your application, there is an interview process with an assessment panel. In putting together your application, try to be as clear as you can. Make it as easy as possible for initially the CNVP office, then the registrar and the assessment panel to see that you do meet the requirements, and in fact wherever you can, demonstrate that you don't just meet them, that you clearly exceed them. So then there's no need for the panel to be trying to add up how many years of experience you have, or to be looking at other things to see whether you've actually met those criteria or not. The other thing about the certification requirements is that a CNVP is required to adhere to the EIANZ Code of Ethics and Professional Practice. That code is up on the EIANZ website, and it commits environmental practitioners to a number of things about promoting environmental principles, demonstrating integrity, representing and promoting the profession, and practicing competently. Now, just on the professional development, I mentioned 100 points. There is a guidance document which I've put up here. Don't try and read all that, but that shows how the points are calculated. So your recognition can come not just from going off to a training course. It can come from a range of other things, such as presenting at conferences, mentoring programs, providing service to EIANZ in some ways, as well as things like doing your own study of journals. So there's a number of ways you can pull those points together. Certainly that's worth having a close look at that to see just how the points are calculated. And for certain activities, you will see that there are some maximum amounts on that per 2 years. Oops, I think I flicked over. There we go. Now, as well as the general certification or general certification level, there are also a number of specialist certifications. These came in a bit later on. So the first priority was obviously to get a general certification up, but recognising that a CMVP could be experienced in a whole range of different areas, and different CMVPs were different areas of expertise. They were seen as the next step being to develop specialist certifications, and so we have those in impact assessment, ecology, climate change, and contaminated land. Now, to be a specialist, to be certified as a specialist, you do need to firstly meet the CMVP criteria, but you can apply for both at the same time. It does put extra requirements on in terms of the information that must be provided, and that varies depending on the specialist certification. The one that I'm the most familiar with is the impact assessment specialist certification, because I convene the impact assessment panels, and as you'll see in that slide there, an impact assessment specialist is required to have at least 10 years of full-time experience compared to the 5 years for a CMVP, with 5 of those being impact assessment specialist, specific. There are some additional requirements around referee reports, so around providing referees. So we want a referee who would be recognised as an impact assessment specialist if they're not already, as well as somebody who's familiar with your work, and we actually ask for examples of your work to sort of demonstrate how you meet the key competencies in the specialist certification. Sorry, I'm just going back. Yeah. Right. Then the other two I mentioned were the contaminated land and climate change. Again, on the CMVP website, there are some specific guidance notes that are for specialist certifications, as well as the general guidance notes and application forms. Certification cost. I mentioned that there are significant discounts for EIANZ members, and that's, I guess, that recognises EIANZ's role in not just setting up the scheme, but the scheme is very much supported by, relies on EIANZ volunteers to be on panels and to be registrars and be involved in the scheme in various ways. Going through the application process in a bit more detail. So, you submit your application to the CMVP office. As I mentioned, the closing date for the next round of applications is the 3rd of March, but I would encourage you to start working on your application as soon as you can, and to try and submit it well before the 3rd of March. One reason for that is it can take a bit of time to sort of find all the documentation you need. But the other reason is that if you have any questions, then it gives a bit of time to, if you need to contact the CMVP office. They'll help you in the first instance, or if they can't, they'll refer the query onto either one of the registrars or one of the conveners, to provide a bit more guidance or help. But obviously, the closer you are to that cut-off date, then the more questions are likely to come into the office, and the longer it's going to take to respond to your question. But once the applications are received by the office, they'll do a quick check over them to make sure everything's there, and then they'll pass them on to the registrar. So the registrar's role is to do the initial review of the application and to ensure that you've provided all the material that you need to provide. And they'll get back to you if obviously there's anything missing. Once the applications have been reviewed by the registrar and released, it then goes to the relevant convener, and the convener's role is to then put together an assessment panel. Now, and panels are generally 3 people. Now, in terms of timing, the registrar it will depend on how many applications come to the registrar at any particular one time. Obviously, if they get a whole lot in a bundle, this will take a while to go through those. That might take around about a month, and then it will go to the convener. For the convener, the timing issue then is a matter of putting together a panel of 3 people who are all available at the same time as the applicant. Now, the scheme relies almost entirely on volunteers. There are a couple of paid staff in the office, but the rest is up to sort of volunteer panels, and likewise the conveners and registrars are also volunteers. So sometimes it can take a while to get a panel together, and as a convener, it can be a fairly bit of a frustrating process to try and tee up a date when everybody's available. So it may be at times you just have to bear with them and wait until that can happen. The panel will then conduct the interview, and that for a CMVP program, for general certification, that will generally be a face-to-face. For the specialist certifications, it's more likely that will be a teleconference, simply because we don't have the number of specialists in the one place to be able to to get a panel together. So the panel will then prepare a report with a recommendation that goes to the certification board. That gets reviewed by effectively a subcommittee of the board, the Board Application Ratification Committee, and they will then make a recommendation to the board as to whether or not somebody is certified. So the final decision on certification is made by the CMVP board, and if the application is successful, then obviously the person will then be certified. If the application is rejected, now what will generally happen will be that rather than simply being rejected outright, it's common for an application to be deferred. So the board will provide advice back to say that we don't think you're quite ready for certification, but this is what we think you need to do to, to be in a position where you can be certified. There's an appeal process you can go through, so you can appeal the decisions, and that will be heard, and then a decision made on final decision made on whether you get certified. But if your application is deferred in that way, as a convener, I try and make sure that where a panel does recommend deferral, that I do get the panel to provide reasonably comprehensive advice and guidance on what the person needs to do to get to a level of certification. So if you don't get that, well then do ask for it. Some advice around applying. And it can take a bit of time to get everything together, but make sure you put the time into it, and make sure that you are prepared for the interview. Make a recommendation on whether you think they should be certified. Obviously, do look at the criteria. Read the criteria carefully to make sure that you, firstly, that you do meet the criteria, but secondly, to ensure that in your application you do cover off on those criteria quite clearly and succinctly, and make it, as I mentioned before, make it easy for the panel to see that you do meet all the criteria. Just some basic things about checking your application to make sure that everything's included that should be. Things that have been signed, statute declaration, for example. Things have been signed that have been signed, and just do a thorough check. There is a checklist at the end of the application form, so go through that and make sure you have got everything. While there is no requirement to include the CPD, the professional development log, it is helpful if you do put that in to sort of demonstrate that you have had that commitment to professional development over the last year or two. For the interview, you may be asked to bring some documents to the interview for the panel to check. So obviously bring those if you do. The panel is testing you around your competence as an environmental practitioner, and also your ethical practice. So expect questions around ethical scenarios and that sort of thing. And have some good case studies ready that can sort of demonstrate your competence as an environmental practitioner and the work that you've done and the sort of contribution you've made to good environmental practice. Now, if you are certified, you do get to go on the CMVP directory. With a bit of a profile, so that's just a little bit of exposure there. The other important thing about a CMV program, to have credibility, a certification program needs to have a process by which anybody can complain about the practice of a certified practitioner. And a system in place to deal with any alleged malpractice or misconduct. And so the scheme does have that, and there's a process to go through. It's treated in the strictest confidence, and it can potentially result in somebody being struck off the CMVP register. And again, there is an appeals committee if that actually happens. So for further information, there's I've mentioned the CMVP website a few times. That's the website address and that's the email address. So if you have any questions, do contact do look at the website and contact the office. My contact details are up there as well if there's anything else you want to talk about. But for questions about the program, it's better to contact the office rather than me, because they know more about it, and it's a better place to answer your questions. So that brings me to the end of the presentation. Now, we do have a facility for people to ask questions. Jamie, I can't see that up on my screen. Do we have any questions?
Hi, Lachlan. Thanks for that. Yeah, so all the attendees, in the little the side panel, there's a section called questions, and you can click on the plus sign, and you're able to send a question through to us there, which we can then make an answer for you. So far, we haven't had any questions. So if anyone would like to ask something, feel free to write it in that box and send it through to us, and we'll do our best to answer it for you.
Is anybody still listening? How did the poll go, Jamie?
So yeah, so I think 76% of the people answered the poll, and they all said yes, they're interested in attending. Sorry, interested in joining up to see MVP.
Oh, excellent. Right. The CMVP office might be busy come March then.
So I can see that most people are still active. I'm not sure if people are typing questions or here we go. We've just had one come through. Can you see those, Lachlan, on your end? If not, I can read them out to you if you'd like to answer it.
No, for some reason that question little box isn't showing up. So I don't know what's going on there, but yeah, if you can.
Do I drag it out?
All right. I'll read the first one out if you like. It's from Suzanne. Are there any other CMVP specializations planned?
I'm not entirely sure. Almost all the specialist certifications have come from or been supported by EIANZ special interest sections. So within the EIANZ, for those who are members, hopefully are aware of this, EIANZ has a number of special interest sections for people who have got interest in a particular area. So we have special interest sections around impact assessment, contaminated land, ecology, and climate change. So basically all of the existing certifications. A heritage special interest section has just formed as of a few weeks ago. So that may be the next area where potentially you might see a specialist certification. But I think in the office we've got, I think Peter from the CMVP office and Alan might have just been able to join us. I don't know if they've got anything to add to that.
Sorry, Peter is here, sitting next to me. She's trying to type back a response to that one.
Doc is right. There's heritage in the pipeline, but I understand the Geothermology Association of Australia and New Zealand have asked for a category to be created as well, and I believe that's being discussed right now.
Okay. So what was that, Peter? Geomorphology?
Yeah.
Okay.
All right. I might move on to the next one.
Can you apply for CMVP and specialist at the same time? Yes, you can. It's treated as a concurrent application, and Lockie has dealt with quite a few impact assessment ones applying for CMVP at the same time. So it's one interview.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah. So yes, yeah, we'll use the same panel and we'll deal with that in the same interview. But as I mentioned, to be a specialist, to get a specialist certification, you do need to meet the general CMVP criteria as well. But you would expect anybody who meets the CMVP specialist criteria would almost by default also meet those anyway.
Okay. Yeah, so another question, do you have any suggestions for selecting referees?
Yeah, it depends on whether you're applying for a general or specialist certification. For the specialist certifications, there are additional requirements around referees. So I mentioned the example of impact assessment, where as part of the application process, we do ask you to submit examples of your professional work and to provide a bit of a written description about how they demonstrate that those examples demonstrate that you meet the specialist criteria. So we want one of the referees to be somebody who's familiar with at least one of those examples, and then we want another referee to be somebody who would be recognised as an impact assessment specialist. I think the other specialist certifications have other requirements around referees as well. So look for that if you are applying for specialist certification. But for general certification, it's the standard things that I think for a referee, if you apply for a job, for a referee for any normal job application, is to pick somebody who knows you well and can therefore comment on your competency and the sorts of things you've done, and provide some examples, as well as your ethical practice, and somebody ideally somebody who's had that experience with you in recent times, rather than using a referee from an employer 10 years ago. So currency is good. I mentioned to try and find people who do have credibility and are so recognised in the environmental profession. So having people who are already CMVPs is good, but that's certainly not essential. And I also mentioned about avoiding people who would be seen as having a conflict of interest. So people who are close personal friends or even family members, you would want to try and avoid. So I think that's probably the main things.
All right, thank you for that one. Another question, is there a discount if applying for multiple certifications?
It's already in the pricing structure. People can apply for standard certification plus a specialist category, and it's one price, and then if they wanted to have a specialist category on top of that, then they would just pay the equivalent of an upgrade fee for that particular specialist category. There's no limit to how many certifications people can go for. There would be a separate interview for each specialist category though, because they are different pools of panellists, of course.
Yeah, thanks, Peter.
All right, next question. So next question we got here is, where are the panel interviews held, and are all costs inclusive of GST?
The GST question, yes, they are inclusive, except if they're in New Zealand, of course, we take that out. The panel interviews are held in each different state, generally a capital city. We can do them in external areas. Lockie will tell you that there are times when there's a small pool of panellists, or people are overseas, or people are quite remote in northern WA, for instance, and we have to do it by teleconference, and that's fine. We just have to make amendment, allowances for that. So the answer is yes. Most of the time, you'll be able to have a face-to-face interview where possible.
Yeah, I did mention with the specialist certifications that often that will be a teleconference, and it's simply because we have, like on impact assessment, we've got 24 impact assessment specialists scattered across the country. So having 3 people who are in the same location and are all available at the same time is pretty near impossible at the moment. But as we get more and more people certified, it will give a lot more scope to be able to have those interviews being face-to-face. I guess one of the other challenges with having a face-to-face interview, again, with a small pool, is that where people are in the same location as an applicant, we sometimes find that they're a bit too closely connected to the applicant, either have worked together in the past or in the very recent past, or know them too closely to be on a panel, because one of the things with panel members we ensure is that they don't have any conflicts of interest in interviewing and assessing an applicant.
All right. Thanks for that one. I've got another question here. I think this one's probably more directed to you. How close to getting a government committing to requiring a CEMVP for submission of work, e.g. sign-off of EIA?
Yeah, good question. I think what's happening in New South Wales? New South Wales is currently reviewing their environmental assessment process, and they put out a discussion paper, a short paper, which does propose that somebody submitting documentation should have signed, or I can't remember the exact wording, but it was basically that somebody had signed something that made them that meant they have to adhere to a code of ethics. And so the EIANZ Code of Ethics and Professional Practice would obviously be one example. Now, how far they take that, I guess we'll see over the next few months. We believe they had shown some interest in perhaps looking at the CMVP as being a basic requirement, but we'll see whether that comes through and what comes out of that process. But I think there's a strong likelihood that review will see movement towards, if not a requirement for someone to be a CMVP or have another suitable sort of recognition, something that takes a step in that direction, such as the requirement to adhere to a code of ethics and to have signed something that that means you have to adhere. And part of that requirement where you have signed up to commit to a code of practice means that there really needs to be a system in place to deal with breaches of that code, which EIANZ has for any member, and the CMVP program also has that system in place. So look, that's a long answer to. At the moment, the answer is none that I know of, but there is interest, and New South Wales is the one that may get there first.
Right, thanks for that.
Thank you, Jamie.
We've got just 2 questions left. I think we're pretty much about to finish up now. Is wastewater management a specialist area? If not, why not?
Water management is not at the moment. The why not is to get a specialist certification up simply means you need a few people who are willing to take it on, work to develop I guess, to put up a proposal for certification and how it might work, and to develop up the criteria. So if you do want to see water management specialist category go up, see if you can get together a few people who can, we'll have talk to the office in the first instance, and then see if you can get together a few people who can actually sort of work on making that happen.
Thank you for that answer. And last one here. In terms of submitting examples of your work, often commercial and confidence requirements apply. Is there a policy of confidentiality for applicants' documents?
Yes, there is. Yeah, and look, this is something we commonly come across in the impact assessment specialist interviews. A couple of things I should mention. One is that the process is confidential, and all panel members have to sign a statement of confidentiality as well as conflict of interest. We have there's a number of ways of dealing with commercial and confidence material. If an applicant is able to provide that to panel members on that basis, then that's fine, and the panel members can review that and then ensure that they delete copies of that, electronic copies of that once the interview is, once the application process is completed. If that is difficult, another option is to bring hard copies to the interview, where that's face-to-face. If it's teleconference, obviously that's a little bit more difficult. If even that is going to be is going to sort of breach requirements, then we did have one person where they were simply unable to get agreement to make documents available in any shape or form, but they did get agreement to providing the table of contents. So at least we did get to see the sorts of matters that the documentation covered. Now that's not an ideal way, but it's better than nothing. At least provide some support to their or some sort of evidence to support their case for certification. So look, yeah. So there are a number of ways to deal with it. And if you've got concerns about that, again, have that discussion. Have that discussion either with the office or when a panel is appointed with the panel chair about how you might deal with that.
All right, thank you very much. That brings us to the end of the presentation. Thank you, Lachlan, and thank you everyone for attending today. If you have any questions, you can always contact CEMVP through the link on the last slide. There is a brief survey at the end of this webinar when you leave. If you could complete that, it would help us very much. On behalf of the Environment Institute and CEMVP, thank you very much. Have a great day.